Hey everybody, Rich Stitzel here. Thank you so much for tuning into the DrumMantra podcast. This is part of a special video series I call Going Deeper. And this time, we're going deeper with the great Mark Walker. When I found out that Mark was going to be in Chicago for a few days, we made a plan to get together for a couple hours where we would play drums for a minute and then talk for a little while for a podcast. And it's funny because what started off as a couple hour hang turned into 4 days, 4 yoga classes, 4 meals, countless hours of talking, 5 hours of drumming, an entire podcast interview, and an entire drum lesson, all captured on film. Now, of course, we can't have an epic 8-hour-long video for you of hanging with Mark. So I've whittled it down to the podcast interview and then a special lesson that Mark is going to give us on drums. It's a 2-part series, and today we're going to see the interview part. Now, this is just a small sliver of everything we talked about. Mark is a wealth of knowledge. He's been all over the world, and I consider him to be one of the finest players on the planet, as is probably agreeable by anyone that knows him. I'm so excited to present to you our conversation. Without further ado, the great Mark Walker. Okay.
All right.
Here we are with Mark Walker. There's so much to say about Mark. His history in the music industry is huge and rich and just amazing. I mean, you've played with some of the most prolific and talented musicians on the planet.
That's true.
Which is
That's true.
Unbelievable. And your story about how you kind of got into that freaks me out a little bit.
Which part of it?
Well, the thing that we talked about yesterday at lunch, where we were just talking about how you were trained. What is your formal training? What's the background of your family? Like, how did you become such a high-level professional musician when no one else in your family was? You didn't really take that many. You didn't study that much from private teachers. I mean, you had a couple.
True.
So I don't know if we should maybe talk about a little bit of the history of like who you've played with, just to give everyone an idea who doesn't know. I'm sure everyone knows who this is.
Some of the main gigs I've had, long-term relationships, have been Paquito de Rivera, Oregon, the band Oregon with Ralph Towner, and also Lyle Mays and Michelle Camilo on and off, and Paul McCandless and Cesar Camargo Mariano, and a few other people, for good length of time.
Yeah, like you were
Andy
Oregon
Norell
for 25 years, right?
Yeah.
Paquito as well, about that?
Right. And I have a history with Dave Samuels and Andy Norell and Paquito, so that's a Caribbean jazz project.
Yep.
And various incarnations after.
Yeah. Now the crazy thing is, you're a white guy from Chicago, and you are like known as the Brazilian Caribbean drummer. I mean,
yeah, it's funny. It's funny when you get pegged like by different people, because different people think you're different things. There are some people that only think I'm a steel band drummer, and some people that only think I play jazz, and some people that only think I play rock.
Right.
Not very many, but
well, it's crazy because I've known who you are way before we met. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've been a name in. Have you been in Modern Drummer?
Yeah, I was in Modern Drummer. Let's see, in the '90s.
Yeah,
and then more recently last year.
Yeah, I think I learned about you maybe way back then. I mean, I had my finger on the pulse when I lived in Texas of what was happening. Did you give a clinic at North Texas at that time?
I can't
early
remember.
90s?
I don't think it was early '90s. I think it was more in the 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I already knew who you were, and then our first interaction was when I joined a band that you had just played the record of, which was a rock project.
Right.
And that freaked me out because I'm like, wait a second, Mark the jazz guy?
Right.
The samba guy? He's playing this amazing rock record. I got to learn all your parts, and it was amazing.
That was a fun couple of records. There was one session we did where, while we were tracking, I turned the snare drum upside down and started playing the bottom head and scratching on the snares and stuff like that. That was I can't remember what she titled it. Something about plants.
Yep.
Because she was always.
That's right.
Never mind.
Yeah. We're talking about Kathy Richardson, the great Kathy Richardson, a Chicago staple who is now the lead singer of Jefferson Starship for the last 12 years or so. And I was with her for 7 years.
That's amazing.
Touring in support of that record.
Yeah.
Delusions of Grandeur.
Beautiful.
That was the only record you did with her, right?
Yeah, I think I did one track on another record.
Yeah.
I don't remember
Maybe
which
the
one
one
it was.
before that one.
Yeah.
So here's, the Mark Walker I knew playing sambas.
Right.
Now playing really well as a rock guy.
Well, I mean, it wasn't really my day job, I guess you could say, but I had done enough sessions where I really had to hit and get a feel. And, the most of the people that know me as a rock player, among the other things, are producers.
Right.
Because they're the ones I played that for.
Yeah. And John Ovnik brought you into that, right?
Yeah.
You worked with him a lot.
Yeah. And he still calls once in a while to do a track. And,
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you went to Lane Tech.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
It was big.
Yeah.
5,000 kids in that school. And actually, in the concert band was another drummer who just became chair of the Berklee percussion department. His name was Dwayne Harris, but now it's Yoran Israel.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really?
So he was a year behind me. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's another guy about the same class as Yoran, George Flutis. You know him?
Sure.
He became like the Philly Joe of Chicago. And then next thing I know, he's like playing transcriptions of John Bonham.
Yeah.
Like, wow, where'd that come from?
Right, just
amazing.
recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and he's in his old cover band from high school is with Chris Clementi, the bassist.
Okay.
And I can't think of the guitar player's name, but they're doing all these Rush tunes.
Amazing.
And Flutis is playing all this Rush stuff.
Yeah, because he could really, he really had the language down for the jazz stuff.
Right.
It was amazing to hear.
So you're clearly, and I also come from that school of, it's important for a drummer to be really good at lots of things.
I always had the experience that the bands I played in were totally mixed, people from all over the place, and totally mixed musically. Mm-hmm. So it was like the whole thing was about diversification.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never played in one band with one group of people.
Right.
I did play in some situations like that, but the most interesting stuff was really varied.
Right, the everything kind of stuff. So when did you start playing drums?
I think I started around age 11, and by 13 I knew I want to be a drummer. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
No one's going to tell me otherwise.
Did you start in band?
I started in band. I had a school snare drum in, I think it was like 7th grade or something like that. And I did my first tour when I was in 5th grade. Let me tell you about it. I brought my drum set to school and a couple of amps that I had and a guitar with 4 strings. And a couple of guys were playing different instruments, and I was playing the 4-string guitar. I was playing the lick from Frankenstein, but that's all I knew, so we just played that. We went from classroom to classroom until they found out what I was doing, and they shut us down.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
You just took it upon yourself.
I just did it
to tour the classrooms.
I didn't have permission from anybody.
That's awesome. That's like safe rebellion. You went to school.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah,
just
there to entertain.
But they said, "Mark, what are you doing?"
Not now. I'm on tour.
So that was my first tour. That was my first tour. It was classroom 208, right. 207, and that was it. That was it. Short-lived.
Yeah, that is wonderful. That's so great.
Yeah, I lived about a block from the school, so it was easy to cart the instruments.
Like a true drummer carrying all the gear.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
He's an okay drummer, but he has a van. He has a PA.
Oh, man. When I moved to New York from Chicago in 95, I had a minivan. So I was doing some gigs in the Village, and it seemed like all the musicians on the gig lived in Brooklyn. So for a while, I was subbing with for Jeff Ballard on Guillermo Klein's gig, and that was really adventurous stuff. That's where I learned chacarera from Argentina. It was like acid chacarera, great jazz players. And I said, anybody need a ride home? And all 10 of them said, yeah, can you drop me off? So there were guys hanging out of the van. I got my whole drum set, bass, all the guys, and I was dropping people like that was the Uber of 1995.
Right. You studied the first person you studied with in Chicago was
Roy Knapp.
Roy Knapp.
His drum set is in the PAS Hall of Fame, and it's wild. Check it out sometime.
Okay.
When I was 13, I went to see Buddy Rich, and I had a solo ticket, and there was an old man sitting next to me. And during the show, of course, that show changed my life.
Yep.
And actually, one of my colleagues was playing and arranging for Buddy at the time, Greg Hopkins, a great trumpet player who lives about 5 minutes from me now. And we're collaborating on some big band stuff. But anyway, I was sitting there, and all of a sudden Buddy says, now I'd like to introduce the Dean of Percussion, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Roy Knapp. And the old man kind of elbows me, and I help him out of his chair, and the spotlight's shining on him. Like, wow, who's this guy? And then 3 years later, I had a neighbor who was connected in the music industry, and I, basically like painted her porch, and she bought me my first set of cymbals. And she also hooked me up with Roy Knapp for a lesson. So I went to his place at 40 East Oak, and he had long since retired. I mean, he was 87 years old, or 86 at the time. I was 16. And I walk in, looking for the drum set. He said, sit down over there. And it's a piano bench. So we start writing out scales, and he's already having me harmonize America the Beautiful or something like that. So he was trying to prepare me to be a total percussionist.
Mm-hmm.
We're writing out key signatures and all this stuff and rolls. And some of the stuff I learned from him, I use with my students today, because it's still, like, one example is just 4 quarter notes, and this 2 and 4 are rolls, closed rolls, and do that at different tempos. And like, people discover, oh, I have to make my hands move this way to get the sound. Now, how many times are they going to move in this particular space of time to make that and come out right on 3 and right on 1, So all these things.
Got like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then, when they get that, then they can play any classical snare drum solo with rolls in it, because they do it intuitively.
Right.
They don't have to think about it. Instead of like, oh, I hope I come out, bam.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
Yeah, he had a lot of great stuff. And he used to, every time I go in, I'd smell chewing tobacco. That was his thing. So I kind of associate that smell with walking in for a lesson.
Really?
Yeah. But one thing Roy Knapp said was that you have to study like a doctor or a lawyer in this business.
That's what I was getting at yesterday when we were talking. Like, that work ethic.
Right. I don't know if I did, but,
Well, you must have.
I know he did.
Do you feel like you had to work to get to be where you're at?
Well,
Was it natural? Was it natural, smooth progression? Or
I wasn't very organized in general. And I felt like there were many years where I was kind of lazy and didn't practice, and I really should have been practicing. But then once I started doing these professional gigs, I was really challenged by not only the people I was working with, by some teachers I studied with. Like, for example, I took a few lessons with Michael Carvin in New York. And he said, "Do you know all your rudiments by name?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I do." And I went home and learned them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to keep myself from getting bored, I practiced the rudiment, and then I started experimenting with orchestrating it around the set. And that just happens to be some of the Berklee requirements where I teach. Forgot to mention Berklee. But I think it was a good lesson in trying to get some foundational stuff happening.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Because if you really have the rudiments together, it's not like you're going to be in a marching band necessarily, but it helps you control the dynamics and the spacing between the notes.
Right.
You know.
And just the vocabulary. I mean, getting from here to here. You know, if you want to get to the left side of your kit on a downbeat,
right,
playing 16th notes,
right,
you need to play a paradiddle to get there.
Right.
Daka boom.
Exactly, and people aren't used to using their left hand.
Right.
Hitting
So
a
it
crash.
kind of gives us the way. It's our language.
Exactly.
It gives us the way to get to different places on the kit besides just playing, like you said, a rudimental,
right,
solo marching style kind of thing.
Right. Not to mention what some of the players have done with it. One time, Cindy Blackman came to Berklee, and she had this film crew with her, and they asked me, "Hey, can she sit in on your class?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And so she was sitting quietly. I was teaching a class in Brazilian percussion, and then we got this groove going, and we had 2 drum sets. I said, "Cindy, would you like to play?" She said, "Sure." She got up, real nice, you know, huge fro. And she started playing this rudimental stuff. It was straight out of Tony Williams, and it was some of the most bombastic, amazing rudimental combinations, which to this day I don't know. I have no idea what she was doing.
She stayed with Blakey, I think.
Oh, did she?
I think she stayed with Art Blakey.
Oh,
I think.
Okay.
I think that's who it was.
Yeah.
Because when she came out and was doing the Lenny Kravitz gig, everyone was like, "Who is that?" And then everyone started realizing, wait a second, she's a highly trained in jazz player who's out there slamming it.
Yeah. I think her what she aspires to is to play like Tony Williams, like in his, yellow drum period. And she really has it happening.
Yeah.
But her own way, which is really cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And now she's with Santana.
Yeah. That must be interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that gig, but she posts all the time, and I see and she does a lot of really cool art stuff too, like with photos of her drums. Really, yeah.
There's so many amazing drummers.
Oh, tell me about it.
And you start to get to know them on social media, and you realize, they're more than just a drummer. And then there's the rabbit hole of that one human. Oh, wait, they're an artist.
Right.
Like, you're posting your symbolism pictures.
Right.
It's like, that's art.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, Mark's more than a drummer. He's an artist.
I come from a family of artists.
Right.
There were no musicians in my family. Well, my brother a little bit, but my dad was a visual artist, is a visual artist, and my mom a little bit was. And my sister, she's a painter. And I never gravitated toward drawing things. I drew a couple of comics at one point about a couple of guys going into a classroom, and they're hearing all this bombastic stuff, and they walk away, and one guy says, "Man, that sounds messed up." The other guy says, "Man, you just don't understand polyrhythms." So anyway, I never really got into doing much in visual art, but
is that a real cartoon that you made?
Yeah, I made that cartoon.
That's
it was based on a situation at Berklee.
That's awesome. Do you have it?
Oh yeah, I have it somewhere.
Oh, you gotta send it to me.
Yeah. Oh, I will. It's very crude,
That's great. That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
But I got that "you don't understand polyrhythms" line from Paul McCandless.
Oh.
He's got a very dry sense of humor, Yeah, so the symbolism thing, just one night at a gig, that looks cool. Right after a gig, there was a pink light shining down on a cymbal. I thought, wow, that looks great. Boom.
Yep.
And then I started seeing that all the time. I had never noticed it before. And I was, okay, I got to capture this. And the best shots I could possibly get are when I'm actually playing, so I can't do it.
Right.
Unless maybe I get a GoPro on my forehead.
Right. What's he doing, man?
Yeah.
He's taking pictures of his cymbals.
Right. Flash. Oh, no flash. But I love when you take a picture of it and nobody knows what it is.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, even though I've been with Paiste since 2002, I don't show the brand name when I take those photos, but I just try to make it appear like, what the heck is this?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, those are great.
And when people ask, what is that? Then I know I took a good photo.
So you did not go to college in the beginning, right after high school?
No. I tried a couple of times. One time something happened and I couldn't do it. And then another time, Lyle Mays called to go on the road. So, but when I moved to New York, I took some classes, but I was never in town long enough to really get into a groove. So, after I started teaching at Berklee, I found out, I started teaching at Berklee online as well. And then I found out that I could go and do a degree program through Berklee Online. So that was really convenient and really crazy and really fun.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like being in a classroom with a bunch of students, but you do interact somewhat. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you can submit assignments from over the Pacific if that's where you are.
That's amazing.
It is.
Yeah. So you took your whole degree is online Berklee courses.
Right. So there wasn't so much in performance, although there was a keyboard class. It was more about some liberal arts things and some composition arranging, songwriting, some business courses, and some music production courses. Mm-hmm. So I got to know Ableton, Reason, Pro Tools, mixing, mastering, et cetera. But, you know, now that I think back on it, I probably forgot most of what I learned. That's the thing.
Well, I mean,
it's so concentrated.
Yeah.
It only took 3 years to get through that program.
Wow, that's awesome.
You know, like I was taking 3 classes a semester, and they're very short semesters, 12 weeks. So, yeah, it was a lot of information, but some really good stuff. I mean, it opened up my head,
right,
which is good.
Yeah. I mean, the things that you're using in real life, those are the things you're going to remember.
Right.
Your Pro Tools, your Ableton, your songwriting.
Sure.
But you're not going to memorize terms from a business class.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
necessarily.
I mean, you can use that marketing concepts. Yeah.
Right, the concepts.
And everybody had a different thing. But a lot of these courses, especially the business courses, they get old so quickly because
I was going to ask, are they
changing.
Current? Do you feel like you were currently educated?
For the most part, they were. But there was one where they required a book that was 9 years old, and they were talking about MySpace. So I'm like,
Yeah.
But it was cool. There was enough information that was still current, so it wasn't a total wash.
It'd be so interesting to take a business class now with like social media tactics and influencer marketing and all these things that are like they now exist. They didn't exist 5 years ago.
Well, I think you would be teaching the class because you're on top of this. You're doing it.
Well, I don't know. It's a study.
Yeah,
we're all in that study right now, I think.
Yeah. I mean, what do? Do you go to the YouTuber that's got the latest thing,
right,
or do you go take a course at a university? Who knows how old it might be? I don't know. That's drumming is so different because it's so vast and it's got such a history. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be the latest thing because there's really nothing new.
Right.
Under the sun.
Right. You're right. Let's talk about what you just said, because I think that's so important that there is the history to drumming. And I feel like I had a student, I guess it's been a decade ago now, who was going to go to the new school after he left high school. And he said, do you think I need to study jazz? Because all I really want to do is study hip-hop. Like, the current Mark Juliana kind of hip-hop playing.
Yeah.
And my answer was, yes. You need to understand the history of the instrument. You need to be able to know where that even came from. Yeah. If you're just doing things right here on the surface, if you only know Cindy Blackman from Santana or Lenny Kravitz, and you don't understand that she has a whole history, then you're going to learn something that is very superficial. You're going to learn the the surface level of something.
Right.
And,
You're not going to the roots.
Right.
Like I tell a lot of students, if you're into this player, find out who they listen to.
Right.
Like, one of my favorite rock drummers was Keith Moon.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear a lot of swing influence in his playing.
Yeah.
Because the Who used to be like an R&B, playing like shuffles, and when I hear him play around the toms, it reminds me of Gene Krupa.
Mm-hmm.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had that thing, and a lot of the rock drummers from that era had that kind of swing. Ginger Baker,
Right.
like a lot of cats. So yeah, I mean, it's John Bonham quoted from Max Roach in his solo. I'm sure Neil Peart did the same. So these guys have been listening to the history of the drums and checking it out.
Yeah.
And then you can make a decision. You can take it this way, you can take it that way, not only just sound like this person you're into.
Right. Now, the history of the drum set obviously is 110 years old, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think to understand basic lineage of the main eras and the main players is important. But then we have the decisions or the availability to go, now I'm going to study Brazilian drumming. I'm going to study African drumming.
Yeah.
Or I want to get into tabla.
Yeah.
There's the rhythmic cultures, the rhythmic traditions of other cultures.
Right.
So once you've done your thing, you start to become more specialized in what you're interested in. What made you become so interested in Brazilian music?
Well, my first exposure to Brazilian music was around the early 80s. I was subbing on a band. I was subbing for a drummer named Phil Gratteau, Chicago drummer. Yeah. It was a band called Made in Brazil, and there were 3 people from Brazil in the band, 3 or 4 people from Brazil. And it also featured an amazing saxophonist, Ron Duor.
I don't know.
And he's like
awesome,
older school. And my friend Akio Sasajima, who played guitar in the band. And I heard the music. I knew nothing about Brazilian music, never really heard it before. And I thought, wow, this has a nice groove, a nice feel, and nice kind of breezy sound. And I started playing it and knew nothing about it. And the piano player, who was the leader of the band, Brando Sauer, he said, Mark, just play real solid on the bass drum. You can play whatever you want on top. And that was my instruction.
Right.
So what really caused me to fall in love with it was learning that repertoire, and also listening to it, because there was a guy who worked at the Brazilian consulate who used to come to the gigs and give me tapes at the time of all the stuff happening in Brazil. So I listened to that. And I was like, wow. I heard, everybody, Elis Regina, Hermeto Pascoal, Milton Nascimento, you name it. And then I was introduced to this world of amazing rhythm, amazing harmony, amazing melody, just wonderful. And I fell in love with it. And then in 1989, Paquito de Rivera came to town, and I started listening to a little bit of Afro-Cuban stuff, and I knew how to play a basic songo groove, but I didn't really know how to coordinate, cascara and clave and all that kind of stuff. I didn't even know what it was. And Howard Levy put the band together because they couldn't afford to fly a rhythm section from New York to Chicago. So we worked together for a week, and Paquito, I hung out with Paquito at all hours, and finally one night I was dropping him at his hotel at 5 a.m, and he said, Mark, you're the only American drummer who gives a shit. You got the gig. And he started calling, and then all of a sudden I was playing with Danilo Perez and Giovanni Hidalgo and Claudio Roditi and all these like unbelievable musicians, and I had no idea who any of them were.
This is in 89.
This is 89, yeah. So it's like a crash course. And the guy, the person who taught me the most about like basic Afro-Cuban rhythms was the piano player, Danilo Perez.
Wow.
Who now heads the Berklee Global Jazz Institute. He's the artistic director. And so I worked in that band for a couple of years, traveling all over the place and discovering different types of music that I never knew existed. Like, we'd go to Guadeloupe, and there was French Caribbean music that I had no idea, like styles like Biguine, Guambele, mazouk, all kinds of stuff going on. And sometimes we'd have bands opening for us that played that style in a jazz context. And then I, just wound up discovering Uruguayan music, and we went to Peru. I heard cajon and festejo and all this stuff. So basically, to answer your question, it was from hearing it and being exposed to it live on gigs I was playing.
Right.
Which was, amazing, because some people say, okay, I'm going to learn some samba. Let me pick up this book, whatever, name your famous drum book. Okay, this groove sounds cool. But what's the context?
Right.
What tune does this fit in?
Right.
There's more than one way to, whatever.
Right. Right.
So, and also, if you learn it from a book, that it sounds like it. Like the guy from the Michigan State University, I can't remember his name, but he said, the paper don't swing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you listen to it, and I try to drive this point home with all my students, listen to it first.
Right.
The last thing you should be doing is looking at the book.
Yeah.
Even in my book.
Yeah, right. I mean, nowadays it's a lot easier to have access to music that 20 years ago you would never have known about.
Right.
Unless you were there listening to it.
Yeah. I mean, they used to have to sneak stuff in from Cuba or whatever.
Right.
But now it's like, it's everywhere.
Now there's almost too much.
Right.
So now you can't decide what you want to go down, what path you want to go down.
And but that's where the tradition comes back in, because you can always rely on, like, if you're listening to Latin music, you can always rely on Ray Barretto, Tito Puente, Cachao, people like that are going to be like, that kind of sets the standard for everything. Right. And then everything that comes after is coming out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about this yesterday a little bit, about the unfortunate situation of like high school bands where you're wanting them to learn how to read a Basie chart, for instance, but they've never actually heard Basie.
Oh, wow.
And the reason that they're not hearing it is because there simply isn't enough time to listen to it. We have to learn to play it.
Yeah.
But if you listen to it, wouldn't you know how to play it better?
But now there's no excuse. I mean,
you can pull it up on YouTube and
on your phone or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope that's happening. And the music business is a mystery to most people. People want to become professional musicians. Someone who's like, I am serious about this, and they could get in school band, and depending on their teacher, depending on the literature that they're playing, they may fall in love with becoming a classical percussionist, or they may fall in love with becoming, the first steps of what you've done in your career. And it's almost like the little experiences that we have along the way strengthen that focus and help us feel safe spending our time in it.
Right.
Because a lot of times we might find ourselves especially early on in our training, we kind of have to, I feel like you have to make a decision on where you want to focus, because and you want to make the right decision, because if you don't make the right decision, there's a chance that it might not work out.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's why I was always like, I want to make sure that I understand different genres and that I can read.
Right.
Because you never know what the call is going to be, and if you get a call, and now being in a major city like Chicago, that's totally different than growing up in the middle of the country in 1989.
Right.
You're not going to get a call to go do a Brazilian gig. You might get a call to do a country gig at a bar.
Right.
So, demographic used to really play into the potential success of someone becoming an actual professional musician.
Yeah.
Now, someone in the middle of nowhere can at least be seen and find those people that might bring them into deeper levels of whatever it is they're studying.
And there might be a Brazilian community there,
Could be, right.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. I mean, just that little era of you getting pulled into that, and then of course your touring is going to be in those parts of the world,
Right.
And so you're going to hear more of it, and it just starts to proliferate with you. Did you feel like you just couldn't get enough? Like you're hearing all these things, and you're trying to learn this groove and this groove and this groove and this style and these different areas where it's coming from. And
it was overwhelming.
Right.
And it still is to a point, but at least I sort of have a handle on what's going on. But it's always changing, so you're never going to be totally caught up.
Right.
But it's okay. I've accepted it. I'll just, if I have a gig coming up with somebody playing a certain type of music, I'll do a little research. Even in a rock context, like a producer called me up just last week and said, we're doing something for Tennessee tourism, and we want it to sound like Lust for Life. So, okay, I had to look up who played on Lust for Life. Hunt Sales, the son of Soupy Sales, who I used to watch on TV.
Right.
And so I saw this whole video on his life, and he turned out to be an amazing musician, studied with Shelly Manne and hung out with all these jazz cats, hung out with Hendrix, and you get this whole picture of what the context was, and that kind of gives you a better idea of how to play the tune. And of course I listened to it, and I tried to go for that floppy, sloppy bass drum sound, I have no idea how they did that, but I did my best. And just experiment, move the mic here, move the mic there, try this tuning, that tuning.
Right. Two heads.
Yeah, 2 heads, no muffling.
No muffling.
Just
no hole.
Bah, no hole.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
Yeah.
And So.
Yeah.
So you kind of learn how to do some research when something comes up, because it's all that information is out there somewhere. Mm-hmm. Could be, that you might have to speak another language to really get the inside story, but somehow you can ask around. There's plenty of people that know. Right. Yeah. So whatever you're interested in, whether it's like Armenian percussion or something from China, or it could be anything. There are people that know.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward all the way to now.
Okay.
You've had this huge career, and you see something new on social media. Mm-hmm. Do you dive into it? Do you get interested in it? Do you try to figure it out and learn it? Or do you go, well, that's for the younger generation. I'm not going to get into fives as hip-hop subdivisions. And
if I have time, or if these days I'm kind of working on my compositional stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually working on a big band record. So I'm kind of like, but sometimes I see something and I think to myself, wow, I would love to learn how to do that. But sometimes I just don't have enough time to commit to getting into that. Right. But sometimes I get a little lazy about that, I got to admit. But I was just recently studying with this percussionist, Jerry Leak, who was teaching at Berklee, and he was teaching me frame drum. And the way he explains his whole binary system, it translates to a lot of stuff, and it translates to a lot of modern stuff as well as traditional stuff. So that's kind of a nice thing to study. So basically, to answer your question, I'm open to it. It just depends on how much time there is.
Right. You feel like you have to pick and choose.
Yeah.
Because you become interested in your composition right now.
Right.
So you want to focus your attention on things that you're creating instead of trying to find things that you want to learn from outside sources. You're trying to get it out instead of get it in.
But also that outside sources are an influence
right.
Like we process it and express it somehow.
Yeah.
But they like for example, like that drag hip hop, where it sounds, that was like very fashionable, and I was always wondering how they did it. And then I played this gig with this band called Patax, which is led by a Spanish percussionist, Jorge Perez Gonzalez, and he had this tune that went into a fast 5/8, and I realized, if you just take out some of the subdivision, then you have that thing.
The wonky shuffle, right, yeah.
Or it could be a subdivision of 7. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying, now I have it down. No, nothing like that, because it's a whole different process
Yeah.
that I'm sure the guys who were playing that music went through. But it's interesting. It's kind of like another angle on it.
Yeah, and that stuff came from that producer Jay Dilla,
Right.
who was just dropping beats and programming over R&B tunes.
And
so it wasn't like I'm going to play groupings of sevens,
Right.
and that way the hi-hat kind of makes it feel like the backbeat is. That was just organic, but now we've made it into a science where it actually is like, yeah, you can do
Right,
that, fives
right.
or sevens.
But what I noticed in the classes I was taking in Ableton, sometimes the response there would be a kind of a slight delay when I'd enter something and it would play back. And so I think he discovered that, oh, this is messed up, but it's kind of cool.
Right.
So he just, went
Right.
with it.
Sliding the snare drum back or forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then people learn how to play like that.
Right, right.
It's crazy.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Like I heard there were young teenagers that learned to sing as if they were being auto-tuned.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's boggles the mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you hear something enough times, I guess you can just do it.
That's part of how you sing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
What do you have any kind of routine or regimen for creating?
Oh, creating?
Mm-hmm. Writing or composing?
It's different. Sometimes I'm just messing around with chords, and I kind of find that something that I like, and then I kind of create a melody based on that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a melody that I've sung into a recording device of some kind that's just kind of catchy, and then I create the harmony after. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I hear somebody's composition and I don't like it, and I think to myself, I can write something better than that. And I write something kind of like that, but not imitating theirs, but like my version of it. Maybe that's more ego-based.
You think?
But if I get
I'm better than them.
Yeah, that's like you're pissed off because that's such a lame tune, But if you get something out of it, then it's worth it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And it's just like practicing an instrument. I mean, you have to practice composing. You can't just sit. I think people think you can just sit down and write a piece of music.
I'm sure some people can.
Some people maybe can, but you have to understand the rules, and you have to understand. You have to know a lot. You have to flex that muscle. Do you try to write every day, or do you try to give yourself a regimen at all?
I haven't, but I would really like to.
Yeah.
There was a guy who used to live here, and I'm spacing out on his name. Anyway, he was like a pianist and writer and arranger and clinician. And he said, write 8 bars every day. Because if you do that, then after a certain period of time, you'll have like 10 tunes in a year or something like that. So, and we're talking big band arranging.
Right.
Frank Mantooth.
Oh yeah,
Frank Mantooth. Yeah, he was out of Chicago. And I thought, wow, that's cool. I got to remember to do that. So it's, one of those things that I really want to incorporate. But usually I just sit down and just mess around, like bang 2 rocks together and see if I can get a spark.
Yep.
And then I hear something eventually, or I don't.
Yeah.
Or another factor is when something is due yesterday and you just have to do it. I've written tunes like, okay, I just got to do this. Okay, that's good. We'll do that. Okay, next section, contrast. Okay, cool. Tweak this, tweak that, and then all of a sudden you have a tune, like in one day. Mm-hmm. I've actually done that because I've had to. So that's another way of doing it. But I suppose you can just improvise what you're comfortable with doing, and then just imagine what you'd like to hear on top of that. Like just improvise a nice groove that you came up with, and then come up with a bass line, and then come up with a melody, and then fill in some harmony, and make a contrasting section, and then see what you can do with it. Try to tell some kind of a story.
Right. Do you write on software?
I usually sit down at the piano, but sometimes I've come up with stuff just singing into a voice recorder. But I usually sit down at the piano, acoustic piano. I like the feel of it.
Yeah.
I like feeling it. And then the second step would be to enter it into MIDI and see how it sounds played back in real time with all the parts going.
Would you enter it in like a notation program or just a MIDI, like Reason or Sibelius?
It was different things. Like when I was first getting into Reason, I would just enter it into Reason. And if I were on the road, I'd enter it into Reason, like one note at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But these days, if I'm doing like a big band chart, I might do like a rough sketch just to get what's going to happen on a couple of staves, maybe 2 or 3 staves, and then kind of expand that out because the voicings are there. And then I'll kind of sing along with it, like sing counter lines, and that's how I'll come up with other parts. And sometimes you get stuck, sometimes you need a little encouragement. So I'm thankful for all the people that have given me encouragement in those times. But also working with amazing composers, they've kind of spilled the beans, whatnot. Like Ralph Towner, he hates teaching. He's one of my favorite composers in the whole world, and he's one of the best classical guitarists as well, and a great jazz pianist. But I've learned more about composition from him, and he hates teaching. Like he's done clinics where he's offered to give the money back after the clinic, But what he's saying is gold, and I've been taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what he says, it's like he's the one that said, bang the 2 rocks together and look for a spark. And when you've got something you think you can work with, then it almost takes on a life form of its own.
Right.
And you just have to let it happen, let it develop. And I asked him one time, there was a tune where I played a drum solo called Aeolus. And it was not a drum solo that had a big flashy ending. It was a drum solo that it was about, Aeolus is the god of the wind. So this is supposed to sound like wind. And then all of a sudden you get to the sort of the eye of the storm and it just kind of calms down. And then he comes in with a piano solo really quietly. So it was never a solo where I got applause or anything like that. And so I wasn't sure if it was really happening. And I realized if I got applause for that solo, it's not really the right solo.
Mm.
And I asked him one time, how do you think I can improve my solo on Aeolus? He said, play the composition. Okay. It's almost like a Zen koan or something like that.
Right.
Okay, play the composition.
Yeah.
So, I just thought about it and thought about the composition and, I know the composition, so I'm just going to play something that is based on that, and it seemed to work.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because the drummers, the history of the percussionist would be the Foley guy on the radio, making the sound of a door knocking or a snake,
right,
or whatever.
Right.
So we kind of have that in our DNA of like soundscapes.
Exactly.
On the drum set.
Oh yeah.
I used to do that with my students where I'd sit them down and say, "Thunderstorm is approaching."
Oh wow, that's cool.
Give that to me.
I like that.
Happy. Just give me happy.
Yeah.
What's happy?
Yeah.
It's not this lick.
Right.
It's have some, playing
makes you
emotion
think outside the box.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's an important little aspect of understanding the instrument is to be able to come from not just a chops space.
Right.
Not just a place of here are the rhythmic things that are appropriate or work, but where's the emotion?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what kind of separates the boys from the men to me in a way of who's brave enough to express himself emotionally if that just means doing nothing. Mm-hmm. And it still feels like an expression, like we were talking about Keltner. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jim Keltner feels like one big emotional expression, and there might not be anything happening. It's like,
right, but it transports you.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, the space is what draws you in.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And sometimes that's why I like playing for non-musicians, because they're not analyzing it. They're just taking it at face value, and they're receiving the emotion of it.
Yeah.
And, they dig it or they don't dig it or whatever, but it's not being analyzed.
Right. I was talking to Andy Timmons, this guitar player that I used to play with, who I mentioned that Tim Miller used to play in the band.
Oh, yeah.
And then Andy became the guitar player.
Uh-huh.
He was speaking of, I love this quote, he was speaking of an audience responding to a solo.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I heard a lot of wows, but not a lot of yas.
Ah.
Yeah. So if the audience is going, wow, they're hearing the music here.
Yeah.
If they're going, yeah, they're hearing the music here.
Ah, that's good.
Yeah, so
that's good.
Where are you giving yourself to everybody? I'm always trying to keep myself in check on that point.
Right, right.
Are you playing to impress or are you playing to move?
I think it depends on how you're feeling, too. I mean, like if you're not feeling good with yourself, it's just going to be, it might wind up being very self-conscious. But if you're feeling like, yeah, it almost doesn't matter what you play. That emotion is there and that expression is there, and people are like, wow.
Right. Well, that's what...
conscious. But if you're feeling like, yeah, it almost doesn't matter what you play. That emotion is there and that expression is there, and people are like, wow.
Right. Well, that's what makes it infinite, because the combination of musicians, I mean, Miles Davis, was it the Four and More concert, that live concert where they played everything like twice as fast?
Yeah.
And isn't the story that right before they went on, everyone wanted their money? And do you know this story about this concert?
Well, one thing I heard about that concert is that at the time they didn't think it was a happening concert. They didn't think the concert was really great, but then later on it became legendary Four and More,
Yeah. I think I heard the maybe it's completely lore.
Yeah,
but,
who knows?
But they were all mad.
Oh, really?
So everything was like smoking fast.
Oh,
that's
wow.
just what I heard.
Oh, wow.
And so I always
Wouldn't
listen
be
to it with
surprising.
that intensity of like, oh my gosh, they're like, they're bringing it out. They're like, whether or not that's true, it inspired me to think that way even more.
Yeah.
Sometimes what we believe is enough. There's the truth, and there's what you believe, and if what you believe makes you, moves you into that new space, maybe that's okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Okay, this is going to be almost impossible. Name one record that was life-changing for you.
I think it was, one of them was Timeless by John Abercrombie. That was the first ECM record I had. Mm-hmm. That was the first record with Jack DeJohnette I had. Mm. And it was an amazing record. It was John Abercrombie, Jan Hammer, and Jack DeJohnette trio.
Wow.
And I just went flippo for Jack. I mean, like, I'd never heard anything like that. And I would go out and see different jazz drummers live and saw him. And through Jack, I found Ralph Towner through this album called Batik, and then through Ralph Towner, Oregon, and wound up playing with them later on. So that's one record. And there's so many others.
I know. It's an impossible question to answer.
Yeah.
But there are those like little pivotal moments where you have this experience that like changes the way you think about things.
Yeah. Well, that was definitely one.
Mm-hmm. When did Jack leave Chicago? Long time.
I think it was in the mid-'60s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was a piano player around here. And then he went to New York and did some gigs on drums and then never came back.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
I actually saw him with Danilo.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That must have been amazing.
It was crazy.
Another record like that, I think, was probably Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, Chicoria with Roy Haynes and Miroslav. Wow.
Yep.
Roy Haynes.
Yeah, that's interesting because Jack and Roy are definitely from the same that ilk of like the time is where I'm gonna make the time.
Yeah, they can bend it and shape it, and it's still totally authentic and
Yep.
valid, and they
Yeah.
can, it's not metronomic, and that's totally cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only I can't think of any other guys that are like that.
Right.
That are allowed to be that way. First of all.
Maybe Billy Hart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fluid.
And they're all still around.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Roy is 95?
Something like that, yeah.
Maybe even 96. And there's a video of him just recently playing.
Yep.
It's nuts. That's nuts. So that fluidity of playing is something that is sort of a theme with things that move you.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Melodic
absolutely.
drumming, interactive melodic playing that is more drumming than there's a lot of drums in it.
Sure.
There's a lot of playing.
Yeah, there is. And it's, as Dijonette put it, it's multi-directional. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, I was getting into the traditional things, with samba and Afro-Cuban and different things like that, but also exposed to people who were maybe or not taking those rhythms and making them more abstract, like Ralph. Mm-hmm. Ralph could sit. I've played sound checks where Ralph starts playing. I don't know. I went into a calypso groove, and he absolutely nailed calypso, like as if he had been listening to it all his life. But he wouldn't play that like that on a gig. Mm. And I don't even know if he checked it out. He just heard it. He heard what I was going for, so to speak.
Right.
And he can, he can play Brazilian music. Like he can play straight up samba, but he chooses not to. He chooses to make it more abstract. So I think that's really refreshing, And he doesn't like when playing jazz, he likes the more of the interactive trio concept of Bill Evans, Scott LaFaro, and Paul Motion, rather than quarter notes. He's always complaining about bass players playing quarter notes all the time. Mm. And with most bass players, that's what they do. Mm-hmm. They just go into 4, But it's not that he wants the bass player to play in 2 all the time. He wants some interaction.
Right.
Shape it. So it's not going to be predictable.
Right.
So I thought, wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's the way we play jazz. It was coming out of Bill Evans' trio.
Yeah.
But it was still swing. It still had to swing.
That is a wonderful experience. Everyone has to be on the same page.
Yeah.
Everyone in the band has to be like, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because if
and some people, you just know they get that.
Yeah.
And some people don't. They haven't. That's not their thing.
Right.
And it's okay either way. I like playing.
Just straight
tight
up time
quarter notes.
Also.
Yeah.
It's all good. That's the beauty.
Yeah.
And to be able to experience all of it, that's the magic.
Yeah.
Having that diversity where you get to play expressively, and then you go do a record date where it's like pocket, and then you get called for this. That to me is what being a musician is. That's the beauty of it. And sometimes I get self-conscious because I'm afraid that there's that thing of like, are you a chameleon or are you an artist? Do you have a voice, or are you the guy that can do everything and you work all the time,
right?
But you don't get hired necessarily for your artistic voice. You get hired because you can do the job really well.
Right. But you still have an artistic voice.
You're gonna
right. I mean, maybe you're not featured. Maybe you're playing more of a team role. That's okay. As long as you're happy doing what you do.
Yeah.
But there are some people who can do both. Yeah. And some people that surprise you with what they can do, like DeJohnette. You never think about him playing a straight groove, but there he is on the Blues Brothers, the second Blues Brothers movie. That's him.
Really?
Yeah. With Eric Clapton.
I haven't seen the second Blues Brothers
at the end of the movie.
Oh,
He's
really?
playing like a straight up,
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He could do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the only time he's ever done that.
Right. Hey, wouldn't turn down the gig
movie
either.
Paying?
Right. He probably didn't even have to ask.
Do you ever think about where you are now and what the evolution of you may become? Do you have like some kind of... Obviously, you can't define what you're going to evolve into, but are there any things inside of you that are saying, I want to open into some bigger thing in my experience?
Yeah,
something.
As a matter of fact, yeah. I mean, I think it's sort of it's almost like that, like we were just in a yoga practice. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing with that is the point that the teacher made was that, you don't have to think of yourself as becoming something because you're already something. Mm. In essence, it's sort of like a stripping away of what you don't need.
Right.
And that's what I'm working on, personally speaking, and also trying to find my own voice musically. That's why I went and studied, because I wanted to be forced to write. Mm-hmm. And then I can just okay, not really interested in doing this and that. I want to concentrate on this. Mm-hmm. And that becomes sort of finding your own voice. Mm-hmm. I found the Ableton Live class very interesting with that regards to that, because I was doing things where I was singing, playing hand percussion, playing keyboards, just coming up with these things. And I don't know what style it was. It was just something in 5 with this melody, and then we went over here, or this sort of samba, and it was me,
right. Right.
So I think every musician should just do that. Just discover what you are, and uncover your true voice, mm-hmm. And so I'm really lucky to be able to be working on that, and still have a gig.
Yeah, I mean that's the tightrope, right?
Yeah,
doing the work, doing the gigs that you call for, but also, and I went through that whole process of, a professional musician works. You have to work.
Right.
There's no time.
Yeah.
If you get the call, you do it, and if you get a bunch of calls, you're working all the time.
And it's a lot of hours. Yeah.
It's a lot of hours, and then the time that you're not working, that's when you have to actually do your work.
Right.
That's when you do your thing.
That's it. And do you want to do it?
Right.
Or do you want to just sleep or eat or chill or spend time with the ones you love, whatever,
right. The discipline to make that time your own for creative act is hard in itself, because something you might feel like something has to be sacrificed.
Right.
Being sleepy, which all of us are,
mm-hmm.
We're all tired because we're all working so hard.
Right.
But I mean, you and I just did 2 yoga classes,
uh-huh.
and I think both of us feel like we're on top of the world. I mean, it's so energizing.
Amazing. Yeah. I highly recommend.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
We both took 2 yoga classes yesterday and today.
Yep.
And
best teacher in the world.
Yeah, my wife. So it's like these things. When we're making these good choices, like I want to call it self-care, but yoga allows you to let go of everything that you're thinking about for a while.
Yeah.
And be present.
Yeah.
That in itself is big. Being present. I mean, that's what Zen meditation is
right.
Sitting and being present. And those things energize us.
Yeah.
Eating healthy.
Right.
It's something that I never thought about until my later years. I think we think about it when we're older,
right?
Than when we're young. And
We can just grab anything when we're young. Yeah,
no
problem.
And you start to realize that when you eat well, it gives you energy. Your body doesn't have to work as hard to digest things that are unhealthy for you, and it makes you think clearer,
right?
Which makes you more productive when you're doing your creative thing. So it all
It's an upward spiral.
It is.
Yeah.
They all feed on
and
each other.
I love what you said about being present, because that's like when we play, we're totally present. We're totally concentrated. We don't have time to do it on autopilot. If you're going to do it on autopilot, why do it?
Why do it? Right.
But then also, if you're creating something new in a compositional process, whether it's writing a drum book or a composition or anything like that, you kind of have to be in that present space and envision something and mess around and, go through that process of iteration to some extent.
Yeah.
And then it's your baby. There it is.
Right. Right. I grew up, my dad was a composer, so he didn't even have to have a piano or anything. He just had a table with a big manuscript paper.
Oh my gosh.
And he just sat there.
Serious. Yeah.
And my mom was a copyist back then. So he would literally rip off pages, and then she'd be in the other room with the onion skin and the and the calligraphy pen and the old eraser that would turn on.
Would he write for big band or what?
He was writing for a whole big band.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Sometimes he was writing for orchestra, like for jingle sessions. So it would be 24 instruments.
Oh my gosh.
And just doing that. And so when I started to write, because I didn't start until later in life, until I actually moved to Chicago is when I first started. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
I need to have my own thing.
Yeah.
And I always thought, is what I'm doing legit? Because I'm not doing it the way that I saw my dad do it.
Yeah.
Why do I have to have all these tools? Why do I have to have Ableton? And why do I have to hear it back and then add something?
Right. He just heard it. That was amazing.
He understood the science of it so well.
Yeah.
And the voicings. I mean, he's a master of that anyway. But it's important to remember that everyone has a creative voice, and to just get in that process of doing it every day, your voice is going to get stronger and stronger, and the important thing is to do it.
Yeah.
And it will evolve if it's supposed to evolve, but it won't evolve or grow if we don't give it our time and attention.
It's another muscle, I guess.
It's totally a muscle.
Yeah,
Big time. Big time. Well, that's awesome. Of course, one of your first pieces that you wrote was nominated for a Grammy.
Yeah, I got lucky with that.
You think?
I was messing around at the piano with like fourths voicings, and I kind of stumbled onto some combinations I liked, and then I came up with a melody. And I kind of had this other tune in mind that was in 6/8. It was from this composer, Randall Corson from Curaçao. But I wasn't trying to imitate that tune. It was like a couple of A sections, then a contrasting section, then back to the A. So I kind of patterned it after that. Sometimes I come up with a form first. And I sequenced it, and then I kind of dug it and played it for my wife, and she said, "Oh, that sounds like one of those intellectual jazz things, And I thought, okay, maybe I'm on the right track. And I was on tour with Oregon, and we were in the van, and I had my laptop, and I had a different tune that I wrote, and I said, "Ralph, what do you think of this? You want to record this?" He said, "Nah, I'm not really interested in this." Well, I also have this one. I didn't even think of presenting it to him. He said, "Oh, that's great. I like it. Let's do it." And just, keep working on it. And so I remember trying to write the end of the second A section going to the bridge. And I passed the computer up to him. He listened. Nah. And then I rewrote it. He said, "Nah, change it." And then I finally came up with this kind of cool angular melody and passed it up. He said, "Yeah, that's it."
Wow.
So that was a composition lesson from Ralph Towner.
In the van, on the way.
And I learned kind of to do that myself. Like when I hear something back, it's either right or it's not. And right away.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. It's like, there's nothing that's in between. There's nothing that's, I don't know. No, it's either right or it ain't.
Right. Right.
Very, Yeah. So that wound up being the first record on first composition on 1,000 Kilometers of CD. Mm-hmm. Remember CDs? And we were friends with Bill Trout, who was high up in NARAS at the time, the Grammy organization. And I said, "Hey, Bill, do you have any advice?" He said, "Yeah, send your CD and get in contact with all these chapter people of the Grammys." So I did, and I also sent out Funk Tango, and I had a tune on that for Paquito de Rivera. It was like a samba and a bayon, and it had a nice arrangement. So, 2 CDs with tunes I had on them. And I sent it to all these people, and next thing you know, Deep Six was nominated, my tune for Oregon, and Funk Tango, the record, won a Grammy. And so I went out to the Grammys, and when I got up on stage, I forgot to say my name. I was so nervous, I forgot to say my name. They almost threw me out. But it was cool. We got the statuette and all that. And, so that, if you're looking to get a Grammy for something, now you know how to do it. Just send it out to everybody.
It's easy. Just get in the van with Ralph Towner.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
How's this?
Yeah, right. Nah, change it.
Yeah, change it.
I mean, he's rejected compositions that I've proposed. Like one time he said, "Oh, Mark, I don't know what to say." Like, okay, I'll go back to the drawing board.
Wow. Yeah.
But,
that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a lifelong journey.
It is.
Playing, creating. I mean, be an artist.
Tell me about it.
An artist and a technician. That's a lot of painters seems like they're too proud to like go paint houses.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Yeah.
But we're not that way.
But imagine what they could do.
Right. Wow.
Whoa.
This house is smaller than I thought.
Yeah, cubist.
Yeah. But in the musician world, we're artists and we're technicians. We do jobs. I mean, you could do a different job and be a musician.
Sure.
But I would always think I'd rather be playing the instrument for my income, I think. What do you think about that? If you're doing a gig for the money, I'd rather do that than work at a bank for the money and then just play my artistic gigs. I'd rather always have the instruments in front of me.
I've always felt that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never worked at a bank, but
it might be fun. I don't know.
Yeah, you'll be rolling in the dough.
Right. Until 5 every day.
Right. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a choice for some people. Maybe they'd be happy. I mean, whatever makes you happy, really. I never was interested in playing, doing pit work, Broadway shows, but I know people who really getting into that, like really want to get into that because it's a steady gig.
Yeah.
But I never was interested in playing the same thing every night.
I know.
But that's just me. Maybe it was an ego thing. Too proud to play everything the same every night.
Maybe. Yeah.
But maybe that was a good thing because then I forced me to be creative in other ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So really, at this point, it wouldn't matter because I think it's all about mindset anyway. You could work at a bank and you could be totally happy.
Yeah, you could.
But
yeah.
I'd rather be playing, of course.
Right. Yeah. What is it? What's the most important thing in life? To be happy.
Yeah, or to be present.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were talking about. You could be present as anything you happen to be at any moment, and you can still have that joy of being present. But yeah, I mean, of course, we love playing drums. This is what we do. This is what we're gravitated towards, and this is in our DNA somehow,
Big time.
Somehow.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
My parents weren't musicians, but somehow here we are.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. It just seems so pure for you. It just seems like everything just kind of, I mean, I don't know your day-to-day life from when you were 20 years old.
Right.
But it seemed like things really, I mean, being in a big city, having talent, being smart enough to know how to be professional with with whoever you're interacting with, and the network just seemed to really grow quickly for you. Like it
was a good city to work in.
Yeah.
And New York too. That was really good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Boston is kind of a smaller scene, but sometimes I have thoughts about moving back to New York. Because there's Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of great stuff going on here.
There is
great
really
players.
Is.
But there's always every scene has its benefits.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some great musicians in Boston. I enjoy playing with them. And there's new discoveries all the time.
Yeah. Cool, man.
Yeah.
I know we could keep talking. And we still have some playing to do.
That's right. Yeah, we get there.
Let's say, we'll figure out where you can be found.
Okay.
So Instagram, MW Drums.
MW Drums, Facebook. I'm not on Twitter that much, but maybe that'll change. I've got a subscription site, markwalkerlessons.com, and a regular website, markwalkerdrums.com.
Mm-hmm.
And that's...
Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do, actually. Yeah, Mark Walker Drums.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good.
And there's more than one Mark Walker, so you just kind of have to...
He's not the baseball player, if there is one.
I'm not the politician. There's actually another drummer named Mark Walker in the UK.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's a great guy and great player, too. So
nice.
So we get each other, sometimes I get an email that's meant for him, and he gets an email meant for me, so we send it to each other.
Nice.
But he's got a really interesting blog. Yeah.
Check out the other Mark Walker. He's much more interesting.
Yeah, right. Check out both of us.
And then you have music on Spotify, probably.
Yes. I have a record called You Get What You Give, and it's on my own label called Fliposphere Music. And I'm doing some gigs here and there with that band.
Cool. And then, of course, Paquito and Oregon, and I'll list out the other people that you play with that it can be heard streaming.
Right.
Since that's how people listen to music now.
That's right.
But still buy CDs. If you're at the concert, always buy a CD from the artist if you're at the concert.
Yeah, we have a special going on my next gig. If you buy a CD, we'll throw in a CD player.
Right. What are those? Yeah. A coaster. Buy a coaster from the band, your favorite band, when you see them live.
You can put it in a toaster.
Yeah, right. Put the coaster in the coaster. So we are going to attempt to play Oceans, which is a lesson series that I wrote for my website, DrumMantra.com. We worked on it yesterday for a while.
Yeah.
And it's
tough.
It's hard. It's especially difficult to do it with two people and make sure everything's perfect between the two people.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay. I think that was cool. I think there was some nice stuff in there.
Yeah, man. Great hang.
I mean, what are you supposed to do on a podcast, right?
Exactly.
It's not, I never wanted to be like I'm not an interviewer. It's not like a Dan Rather.
No, it's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from you, man.
Well,
seriously. It's like a good lesson.
I think that's what it's all about.
Like when you mentioned you have a regular compositional practice, I said, oh shit, I don't. I
know.
really should do that.
Yeah.
I really need to do that. Whatever it is. You know?
I know. I do too. Yeah. There are times where I get down and I will work for 10 hours.
Yeah.
For weeks in a row.
Wow.
Like every day.
Yeah.
All day long.
Man.
Working on compositions.
That's amazing.
And then, this is all for the drum mantra, and then it turns into the practice.
Yeah.
Of those compositions.
Right. Amazing.
I don't know where I'm at right now. I think I'm just tired.
Yeah, I hear you, man. But you're also putting it out there. I mean, doing this. That's another whole thing we didn't even talk about. Marketing. It's like, damn.
I know.
It's another job.
Yeah. Yeah, let me have to my publishing company.
Yeah.
It's over there. Publishing company's right there.
Yeah.
In fact, you want a t-shirt?
Sure.
What size do you wear?
I wear a medium. But maybe my son would like one.
What size is he?
He's